Cross-Politic begins in 3, 2, 1.
Have a heart that breaks for a dying city.
Stop cursing your future.
Is not true.
For all intents and purposes, I am a woman.
No government, no political system has ultimate supremacy. Jesus is King of Kings, and it's about time our nation returned in humble submission to his lordship.
You are not protecting women. You are authorizing the destruction of 500,000 little women every year.
I didn't start it. But sir, with all due respect, that's the argument of a 5-year-old. I didn't start it.
Right, when the Spirit comes upon people, they go to war, they go to battle, and the enemies of God are driven back and they're slaughtered.
You are listening to Cross-Politic with Gabe Wrench, the Water Boy, Pastor Toby Sumter, and the Chocolate Knox.
Hello, y'all. Welcome to Cross-Politic. It's fall. It's fall now. The weather's good. And we also have Pastor Wilson joining us on the show today. Thanks for coming in, man.
Thanks for having me.
He always makes me nervous every time he comes.
Well, I noticed David didn't interrupt me this time.
No, I didn't
David,
say anything. No, I didn't
say anything.
Gabe said that fall was good, but then he said we're having Pastor Wilson on. He didn't say whether that was good.
I'm still surprised that you came back. Thank you.
That's always the tell when they come back.
Yeah. We must be doing really bad.
We have a repeat client.
Maybe this is the second witness, though. He's coming back to get a second pass before he brings the charges.
Before the charges come.
I actually had a question since you're here. Something we've been trying to work out for a long time. How did Gabe become a deacon again?
That was your son-in-law's fault.
Really?
There's a lot of money involved.
It was dark.
We were desperate.
How do we undo this? How do I undo this?
Right. That'll go real well. That'll be great. Oh man.
Well, it's been quite the week. With everything that's been going on with Vegas, Congress passing 20-week, or the House voting on 20-week abortion bans.
Okay.
At the federal level. We also had, we might talk about this, but Canada trying to push a bill to force gender-neutral pronouns on everybody in Canada.
We need a special pronoun for Canadians.
Things to work on. Where's my notes? Things to work on during the show. Pronouns for Canadians.
Yeah, right. We should. People should write in with their suggestions.
Oh, memo.
Oh, give us a memo. Hey, we got a memo to play.
We probably got. I know we got some Canadians that listen.
We do.
Maybe they can help us.
We do. Dick Barendrick, I've been emailing with you.
I'm taking notes.
You owe us one.
I think it should be one pronoun. Ed.
Sai's listening to the show. You know, Sai's Canadian.
Oh,
so
Sai.
Yeah. I think he just needs to become a citizen.
But Sai agrees with the joke. He agrees with the joke,
True.
so we're okay.
We need that.
Right in. We got a couple announcements before we get into
Usually
the news.
you laugh at jokes and you don't agree with them.
Depends on who they're at.
I don't know. I laugh all the way around.
So what's happening in Canada, does it have effect on us at all? Is it affecting what's happening in America at all?
I think it will. I mean, it's just this is already happening.
It's
in
giving
New York.
people bad ideas.
You guys,
it's too close to our borders,
right?
You guys forget New York City is already trying to run this play. They're already trying to go after businesses for not referring to their gender neutral or the gender preference of their clients, of the customers.
This is something they can bring a.
It's finable.
They can sue their employer
in New York City already. So.
Yeesh.
The city ordinances are already allowing for this.
Speaking of city ordinances, you just said something about local city news.
Yes.
Right before we started. What was it again?
Yeah, so we live in Moscow, Idaho, Latah County, and we're surrounded by tribal territories, Nez Perce, Coeur d'Alene tribe,
and
everything. Although Moscow, the city of Moscow is largely Caucasian. David, you know about this.
Huh?
The city of Moscow is mostly Little Norway.
Yeah, right. Liberal Norway.
I don't see color, guys.
Stop it.
Colorblind.
And so Columbus Day is coming up.
I don't remember.
Did it happen yet? What's Columbus Day?
Dang, that's messed up.
That's.
We don't care.
This is not to get an introduction to this news segment, is it?
It's coming soon.
Columbus Day is coming soon. And so our city council, someone proposed, the Human Rights Commission, that's who did it. The Human Rights Commission here in Moscow proposed to have Indigenous Peoples Day.
We have a Human Rights Commission here in Moscow?
We do. And
they passed this.
And so they proposed it to the city council, and they passed it and everything. So
this is like pushing back against federal encroachments, right?
Yeah, because that's what they're doing. That's the play they're running. So Columbus obviously is a federal holiday. Well, our local city decided to make the local celebration an Indigenous People Day,
right,
and everything. And I was in a debate, or whatever you call it, an internet scramble. Must have been like 2 years ago, and they were. Did I mention they were attacking Texas? Which I'm from Texas, right?
It took 5 minutes to get back to Texas.
And they were saying that the Alamo is a just war for the Mexicans to come and attack the Texans because they could take back their state. Right? The promised land.
I'm listening.
The promised land. You listening? But I was thinking, I was like, because they were trying to argue by some sort of, hey, we were here first kind of concept, and but the problem was the Aztecs had Texas before the Mexicans, and then I think the French took it from the Aztecs, and then the Mexicans took it from the French, and then the Texans took it from, or the Americans took it from the Mexicans.
Just imagine what the world would what the world would look like,
right,
if what a map of the world would look like if everybody had to go back to where they were supposed to be.
Right.
Yeah, I already don't like the idea. Personally,
I'll tell you right now.
I like where I is.
Well, I don't. Yeah, I don't like that idea.
I like, if you want to come here and visit, we can fellowship and share some food and culture.
I'll buy you a beer.
Yeah, but I don't. I don't want to go back.
Yeah, this is talk about unscrambling the egg.
Right.
You just can't.
Right.
Do it.
No. That's why.
But why are they doing that? What's the play being run? Right. It's some sort of battle over control, over.
It's the same as the toppling statues. It's cultural Marxism. What they're doing is they're saying we are at war with Western civilization and Western culture, and we want to tear down the monuments, the heroes, the legends, the stories. We want to rewrite absolutely everything.
So you think it's a battle against Western culture?
Absolutely.
Is it a battle against just culture? I mean, is it certain kind of like just lawlessness? So, I mean, would they do it to another entrenched culture?
Not the same way.
Okay.
There have always been, movements of revolution against established cultures, and
right,
so a long-established Chinese dynasty is going to have some unrest develop over time.
Right.
But I think there's a special antipathy, not because Western culture is not the same thing as the kingdom of God. It's not the same thing as the
but it's
the
been
church.
Heavily,
but it's the history of the kingdom of God and the history of Western culture are so intertwined that you can't talk about one without talking about the other. And the reason there's a particular animus toward Western culture is not because of all its faults, which are many,
right,
but Western culture is attacked with its faults. But it's not being attacked for its faults. It's being attacked because it's so associated with the Christian faith. What they're trying to do is get at the gospel and get at the kingdom of God through a proxy.
Right.
And that proxy is the culture that is most influenced by the gospel over the course of centuries. So when Western culture sins, and that we've often sinned grievously, those things are brought up, and we are attacked with them. So it's the same reason David was attacked with his adultery,
right,
with his
right,
murder, but that's not why he was attacked. He was attacked because he was a man after God's own heart.
Right.
His sin made it easier for them to attack him.
Right.
But the animus, the hatred, the malice is all because of gospel and Jesus.
So just to move this, so Christian brothers who are, they're on our side for the most part, but see something like the Robert E. Lee statue and they say, okay, that points to a time in American culture where a lot of evil was done, and that statue is a symbol of exactly what is not Christian about America.
Right.
And so,
and I would say, before you say, hey, that seems like a good idea, yeah, slavery is bad, even Robert E. Lee thought it was bad, so let's take down the statue, you need to back up a couple of paces and say, is there a play being run on us? Is something happening that's beyond this particular thing?
Yeah.
This particular issue. And when all the Confederate statues started to come down, it wasn't minutes before other things were being attacked too. Right. The Washington Monument. Now, does the Washington Monument have to come down?
Oh,
the
absolutely.
Jefferson Memorial. Yeah. What about Yeah. So basically, there were people who saw that the cultural Marxists who hate Western civilization were attacking the Confederacy, which was defeated, incidentally, 150 years ago. Right. That war that was a long time in the rearview mirror. They were attacking the Confederacy and the mementos, the memorials of the Confederacy, because it was low-hanging fruit. Mm-hmm. It was easy to get at. But the reason they were doing it is they're after the whole tree. They want to get all the fruit. They want to take a chainsaw to the tree because they hate Western culture.
And that's a vulnerable point in the line.
Yes. And it sounds like, so what you're saying is, are they poisoning those people who are trying to see something maybe rightly, and they're kind of poisoning the well and say, if we can get you guys on board with this, we can help take down the whole kit and caboodle?
Yeah. There are some tender-hearted Christians who say, oh, that's a reasonable point. Yeah. I could go for that. And they think that if they give in to this, that it's somehow going to make the conflict go away.
It'll satisfy.
No, it's going to make the conflict accelerate.
Yeah.
So,
and it'll go away you don't want it to go.
So, well, how do you handle it?
Winston Churchill said that an appeaser is someone who throws everybody else to the crocodile, hoping to be the last one eaten.
Right.
And that's how appeasement works.
Yeah. Right.
And that's what's going on now. There's absolutely no way to take the logic that the Christians who were accommodating the demands that the Confederate flag come off of Mississippi state flag or South Carolina, the arguments that they were using, we've got to do this because we have to stop offending our black brothers.
Yeah.
Right. Well, then within weeks, you have people protesting the national anthem and the American flag for the same reason. And then I turn to the Christians and say, where's your logic now? You're willing to kick the Confederacy in the head because they were defeated 150 years ago. Right. But on your anti-idolatry principles, why aren't you calling for the removal of the American flag? Mm. Why isn't the gospel senior to that? Mm-hmm. Well, it's not a gospel issue, or it is, but upside down.
Yeah.
So press this just a little further. Okay, so David committed adultery. They had something real there. And that he wrote Psalm 51 in confession of it.
Right.
So how do you handle that in a way that, okay, you're right, you need to confess it. The point's given, but then the bigger play is wrong.
Yeah, the drunkards. Does that make sense? It says in the Psalms that drunkards in the taverns are singing their songs about David because of his sin.
Right.
And you acknowledge that, but then at the end of David's life, you see the court politics, the turmoil with Nathan the prophet, who confronted David on his sin,
Absalom.
And Bathsheba, who was complicit with David who was the mother of Solomon and also the mother of the child who died, and she was the Uriah's wife. She and Nathan are part of the court politics, fighting for the good guy's side,
right?
And their job was a lot harder because of David's sin,
right.
But you still have to do the job. You still have to stand up for what's right.
Right.
Yeah, I personally like the flags and the monuments up there because I need to know where not to go. I'm serious. Like in Georgia, it was great because when I saw a flag waving, I knew where I wasn't supposed to be at after a certain time.
You're not going to buy a car from that dealership?
Well, I don't mind buying a car. I just want to know he wants me on the lot. Usually it was like not a welcome sign for me. I remember one time I was coming. So right down by my house was a graveyard, and that was I didn't know it at the time, but that was old family, old folks fought in the war.
Yeah.
And I'm going to work, and I remember clear as day, everybody was in their uniforms, with their Confederate flag, and they out there with the drums and the full nine. And I'm driving by at the stoplight, and I'm looking forward, trying not to look to my left where the graveyard is. And I did anyway. And lo and behold, everybody's just looking at me. Just waiting for me to go.
They just wanted you to say hi.
Yeah.
Obviously.
I did wait. Hey guys, I didn't get anything back. When light was green, I was gone. Yeah. But it was a sign for me to know where not to go. So I appreciate the landmarks. So I say we keep them up. I don't like surprises.
That's good. I think let me bring this in here because I think there's some related stuff going on. So the House passed a 20-week abortion bill or anti-abortion bill, however you want to define it, depending on which side of the fence you're on. or which side of the week you're on.
Okay.
And Ben Sass, I thought Ben Sass tweeted, of course, in support of it.
Is it Sass?
Senator Ben Sass, right?
Yeah, he's a senator, like Nebraska or something like that.
I've been saying it wrong, Ben Sace.
Oh,
dang it! Sorry, Ben.
That's Anglo-Saxon of you.
That's Gabe's job.
I know. I think I heard him say it like that.
No, don't blame it on me.
At least you didn't do it the French way, sassé.
No, I wouldn't have did that.
So
What'd he say?
Here's what Ben says. Let me read this real quick. And he said, proud to co-sponsor legislation this week that would provide common sense protection for unborn children at 20 weeks after fertilization, a point at which there's significant scientific evidence that abortion inflicts tremendous pain on these vulnerable human beings. Americans rightly condemn human rights abuses around the world because we judge societies on how they take care of the most vulnerable members. There's no good reason for the United States to be on the list of human rights abusers like China, North Korea, in all allowing these kinds of abortions. I think he's trying to. I mean, he's making the comments based off what is almost kind of easy to make comments off of. So he's trying to tie this into, hey, it's a scientific thing. After 20 weeks, they can feel more pain. They have all their limbs, all that stuff. I guess I feel like he's still being soft in this. And one other point here, Jeff Durbin, I think, mentioned this. A lot of the pro-life legislation that we've pushed these last 30 years are basically, if the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade, pro-life legislation would now keep abortion legal at some level in some states. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense? Where
sure.
After 20 weeks and stuff. So I don't know. I'm just a couple thoughts there.
Yeah, a quick thought.
Yeah.
I'm entirely in favor of this. If it gets through the House and the Senate, I'm in favor of it on the basis of incrementalism.
Yeah,
right. So this is the game the left plays with us all the time.
They get it, don't they?
They get it because when they demand, the environmentalists will demand, we want 20,000 acres set aside for wilderness protection, right?
Mm-hmm.
And everybody knows that next year they're going to get that, and everybody knows that next year they're going to be asking for another 20.
Yeah,
everybody knows that they're playing a long game. It's incremental, and we need to do the same thing. Mm-hmm. If someone said to Senator Sass, "Be honest, do you want abortion outlawed completely eventually?"
Yeah,
he should say absolutely.
Yeah,
but I'm going to take what I can get now, and you're back on your heels now because this is so obviously wrong.
Right.
And I think we should be incrementalists out of principle, not incrementalists because we'll get that much and then we're done.
Right. Yeah.
But I guess, so I feel so jaded by that argument because there's been a lot of pro-life legislation where that's actually what they end up only caring about is actually incrementalism and not actually fixing the abortion problem, not actually dealing with it all the way. If you put the easy button on the table in front of a pro-life,
hit it.
Hit it and say, I'm going to be done with abortion. I don't think most of us would hit it. I don't think most of our pro-life lobby organizations would.
I'd like to come back to that.
Absolutely.
Okay.
I think we should. When we come back, pro-life, Vegas shooting, and Jimmy Kimmel. More on Cross Politics. Next.
Canon Press is a publishing house located in Moscow, Idaho. At Canon Press, we create and provide products that sketch a vision of the whole life, a whole culture. A life full of beauty, tradition, education, community, laughter, and celebration. Unashamed of Christ, and sharply at odds with the values of modernity. A mature culture with the church at the center, living out the good life, one family at a time. We believe our book, audio, and visual selections reflect this exciting life that God has given us under the sun. As the wisest man said, go eat your bread with joy, and drink your wine with a merry heart, for God has already accepted your works. CanonPress.com.
For 21 years and counting, New St. Andrews College has sought to obey Christ's Great Commission to disciple nations and build him a house, not just in Jerusalem, but throughout the world. Not with stones and mortar, but with living stones. We build and fight. This is the task of a Christian liberal arts college, to equip students with the tools to build and fight. And this is our joyful task as we seek to graduate leaders who shape culture through wise and victorious living. To learn more, check us out online at nsa.edu/explore.
I wasn't ready for that one.
I need the opener. I want your cap.
I knew that.
Give him in the opener.
I did. What is this segment brought to you by?
Welcome back to Cross Politic. This segment is brought to you by me trying to get the cap off of my bottle.
Hurry up. I can't wait to hear Pastor.
And we got Pastor Doug Wilson with us in the studio today. We're really grateful to have him. And he was about to take Gabe down to the mat.
I can't wait because he's already got him in a headlock. I can already see it.
He's getting ready.
It's already there.
Give him a good noogie.
He's just about to put some weight on it now.
I was just hoping to get the last word on that because I heard the music.
Yeah, right.
So Gabe was saying if there was an easy button in front of us to hit,
he doesn't
think Christians. Now I completely disagree. I think Pastor does too. So I'm gonna let him finish that.
Okay.
You wrong. Go, Pastor.
I want to debate Knox about this.
Okay, so let me make the first obvious point that on issues like this, there ain't no easy button.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks.
All right, so if you said would the typical pro-life politician, without any pressure from the base, stand up for the unborn out to the end of the line? The answer is a lot of them wouldn't. Yeah. I agree with that. Really. All right. So,
a recent Republican senator stepped down because he pressured his a girlfriend to have an abortion. Did you hear about that?
Congressman.
Excuse me.
Yeah. So
there's examples.
So yeah, there are hypocrisies involved in all this, and I know how the world works. So I know that you could have pro-life organizations whose donor base depends upon continuing to get money to fight abortion. If we believe there's a poverty industry, that what will people whose livelihood their livelihood is based on helping poor people, what would happen if there were no poor people? Well, they'd have to get another job. They'd have to go do something. There are organizations, relief organizations, mission organizations, pro-life organizations that have a donor base that's based upon a continuation of the problem. Right. So I know that that's a real temptation. That's a real difficulty, and we should acknowledge that. But I also think that there are soldiers who have kept the pro-life issue alive for 40 years. Right? They've kept it alive. It's not a live issue in Europe. It's not a live issue in a lot of places.
Right.
And there are there's a March on Washington every year,
right,
with 1 million, it's a lot of people that have gone there. So the reason the fake pro-life politicians have to pretend to be pro-life is because there's a lot of genuine, actual pressure on them.
Yeah.
And so consequently, I believe that there are principled people who want to go the incremental route. If there were an easy button in front of me, that would just abolish Roe v. Wade, I know that New York and California and Illinois would still be pro-choice.
Yeah,
right.
But we would have 35 states all of a sudden overnight that would outlaw abortion.
Right.
And then we would have a beachhead to start tackling these other states.
Right.
So I think that there is,
or they just die off.
Actually,
culture life, culture
because
death.
The people who are pro-choice have bought into idiotic identity politics, idiotic economics, and people are fleeing. Look at the U-Haul rental prices in California to Texas, as opposed to Texas to California.
Right.
You can tell which way the traffic's going.
Yeah.
So they're bleeding people. Yeah. They're at war with the next generation. All of that. So basically, I believe that principled incrementalism is a thing, and I think that if the resurgent abolish human abortion now movement, which I support, I would call myself an abolitionist. If I could abolish it all, I would abolish it all.
Yeah.
But the abolish human abortion people need to not taunt veterans of this war who kept it a war.
Yeah.
The only reason you can have abolitionists taking a hard line now is somebody kept it an issue.
Yeah.
And if someone is simply because they're an incrementalist are called a compromiser, I think that that's just young bucks getting above themselves. There are compromisers.
Yeah.
I wonder if more of the part of the problem is I think that it looks like, from my vantage point, that there have been a whole lot of those compromisers in positions of leadership and in politics. And so at the grassroots level, you have a lot of, I would say, good-hearted people giving their hearts and their lives, pastors, people at the grassroots who believe in outlawing abortion. But it seems like there's been a bottleneck created at the same time where millions of people marching for life and relative incremental steps being relatively few and small.
Like
over
this
40 years.
And this happened in Idaho just like the last 2 years ago. Congress or Idaho state legislator passed a bill that was banning the doctors prescribing anti-abortificants over Skype.
Right.
And then what happened was the feds came sniffing in Idaho.
Just sniffing.
Like we might take this to court.
And so what they did, they went back to legislative session and said, let's appeal that little part of the bill, removing.
So an overwhelmingly pro-life state house, state Congress just rolled over.
I think a lot of the people now that are in this are seeing people who have been on the front lines and kind of bruised and beaten and saying, why aren't you guys, it's not like you haven't been fighting. We see that you've been fighting, but don't lose heart. Run this thing right up the middle. We can do it, you know?
But I think what happens is that I do think, though, that we've been sometimes duped by those people. They say, I'm pro-life and I'm really trying hard.
Right.
But what they're actually trying to do is try really hard to keep their seat in power.
Yeah. Sure. But you always make the distinction. In other words, there are some people who make the noises, the rhinos, yes, I'm pro-life, and but they lose on purpose, right? Mm-hmm. So you watch the Senate very closely on this, because if another vacant when Scalia's seat when Gorsuch replaced Scalia in the Supreme Court seat, that didn't change the balance of anything.
No, right.
If Kennedy retires, or if Ginsburg retires or dies or something like that,
right,
the next seat, if he appoints another Gorsuch, another true blue conservative, that is going to transform the court. And that would mean one more conservative on the Supreme Court, just one more. Mm-hmm. Roe v. Wade's going down. Okay, now, if that happens, then the Republican majority is going to instantly lose 3 to 5 squishes. There'll be Republicans who are called moderates. They're actually liberals.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Would abandon ship and wouldn't be willing for Roe v. Wade to go down. Right. So basically you would have a situation where 90% of the Republican senators would be willing to vote for Roe v. Wade to go down. Mm-hmm. And you'd have 5, let's say, who abandoned ship. Right. I don't want to call the 90% who would vote to outlaw it, and I know they would. I don't want to call them names. Yeah. That's not where the problem is. Yeah. The problem is with the squishes. Right. The problem is with the people who are going to abandon ship. So there are.
I guess I look at Idaho being kind of indicative of, if push comes to shove, they'd actually repeal it. If the federal government can put pressure on abortifacients being prescribed over Skype, and then the senators, without any pressure.
Well, they've already proved that. I mean, look at
they just give in, they bend over, and that's what I feel like would happen with most pro-life senators and congressmen.
I mean, Dan Foreman can't even get his bill pushed.
He couldn't even. Dan Foreman couldn't even get his bill into
on the floor.
The chair, the committee. The chair just had to pick it up. All the chair had to say is, "Yeah, we'll take your bill," and he couldn't even get that. He couldn't get the chair to pick it up.
Right. So why?
Because they don't want to they don't want to make abortion illegal in Idaho. Ultimately,
well, no, I would say this is politics. There are people who want to make abortion illegal in Idaho.
They don't want to lose.
They don't want to lose.
That's right.
So you could write a bill that was, let's say, let's introduce the guillotine and behead all abortion doctors.
Ooh.
I'm
in.
All right, so let's say you make it as draconian and as strict and as pro-lifey as you can make it, right?
Yeah.
You could introduce that bill and set the actual cause of saving lives back 20 years. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. That's what every clinic bombing did. That's what every abortion doctor murdering an abortion. It set the cause back. Now, there are people who are breathing a sigh of relief. There are compromisers in the pro-life movement who don't want to succeed.
Yeah.
They want to keep a perpetual tension going. They don't want actual victory. but there are a bunch of people who do want actual victory.
Yeah,
sure.
And, I think that's absolutely.
And some of the hotheads are. They're concerned that some of the hotheads are going to set the cause back.
Right.
And some of the compromisers take up the chance and say, yeah, you're going to set the cause back, and they secretly.
But I don't know how Dan's Foreman legislation would set the cause back. He was Idaho. It's already illegal to kill a baby in utero in Idaho, and when 1973 happened, Idaho just added the terminology except for abortion.
It just said that it's a non-prosecution clause. It says that we won't prosecute.
Right.
Abortions. And so Dan was just wanting to basically rescind that.
Right.
And then the state of Idaho, if we had one state.
In a conservative state,
if we had one state become an example, hey, we just don't do abortions.
No, I look, as a strategy, I believe that if you had a true blue governor who understood the issues and you had a strong conservative majority in both houses, then I think that the stage is set for brinksmanship.
Yeah.
And I think the time is now to do that.
Yeah.
But Jesus says you have to count your troops before a battle. You have to do it. You count the cost. Do I have the resources to win this one?
Yeah.
Right.
Do I go after it? If states had refused to tolerate Roe v. Wade right when it was handed down, we had a moment then.
Yep.
And I think we have a moment coming now. Right.
Yeah. So we can all feel that. We can feel that coming.
Oh, I feel the shift coming, and I believe that a bill like Dan Foreman's at some point is going to get a hearing.
Yeah.
Right. So the issue is not whether I'm opposed or supportive of doing that.
Right.
The issue is attributing motives
to
the people. Some people don't want to go along because they're not that pro-life. Some people really are pro-life. They're really concerned about the tactic. Some people are, it's a war. Right. You've got different strategies.
What do you think about, one of the things I've thought about is just in terms of how to build a culture of courage.
Right.
So there's a way of talking incrementally, which sounds realistic, I think, that can inculcate actually cowardice.
Right.
Even though sure, you have to use strategy, but at the same time, we're not actually building a culture of courage where David shows up at the battle where his brothers are with Goliath taunting them and says, all right, so who's going to go take him?
Right.
And everybody's like, well, no, shut up. You can't do that. And David says, well, fine, I'll take him.
Right.
And so now I think you're right. There are some hotheads that are doing, I think I'm not at all interested in the tactics where people are like protesting churches, that aren't pro-life enough for them or this kind of stuff.
Chaining themselves to the abortion clinics.
Well, yeah. I think the particularly being really very virulent and just all kinds of animosity for the pro-life movement as a whole without making distinctions. I'm not in favor of that at all. At the same time, it seems like there is something about calling for abolition, calling for we're going to end it.
Sure.
That in a good way is building a culture of courage and telling leaders, especially, because I think a lot of leaders think we don't have the support. We don't have the support.
A lot of leaders.
And you say, if you say we will support you if you stand up on this issue.
Right.
That engenders courage.
Sure. So I'll give you a case in point. If someone said, hey, would you sign this petition, or would you, if the slogan is abolish human abortion now, from the moment of conception on. Okay. I'm in. I'm an abolitionist. I want to abolish human abortion now. And I think we ought to be articulate that that's the end game. That's where we're going. That's what we want to do. Right. So I got I was in an internet ruckus a year or so ago because I got a thing.
Only one?
Yeah. Well, only one about this. Only one about this. Yeah. So I got a petition, that wanted to, people wanted to get on the ballot in Idaho.
Oh, was it the AHA people?
Yeah. So, but
they
basically,
contacted me too. I was like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
Well, basically what I read the bill.
Yeah.
And it was like any kind of abortion. It wasn't just saying abortion should be against the law and there should be penalties.
Yeah.
It was any abortion for any reason at any level is first degree murder. Right.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, if someone goes and shoots their grandmother, okay, and everybody in the world agrees that that's a murder and ought to be against the law, etc. For centuries we've had distinctions in different kinds of negligent homicide,
absolutely.
first degree, second degree murder. We've
Yeah.
made all
Biblical
these distinctions.
case laws has that.
Well, yeah, this goes back to the Bible.
Absolutely.
That not all murder is simply murder.
That's right.
All right. So I said, okay, this legislation was built out of 2x4s. This is clunky. Right.
Mm-hmm.
It's badly written. It's going to go down in flames. It's going to set the cause back. This is not what we want. This is not what we want.
Sure. Right,
and
right.
this had nothing to do with whether or not I want to abolish human abortion.
Time to burn the Doug Wilson jerseys now.
Because and so when I said I didn't answer, I didn't answer the request to be involved, and then I found myself attacked. Pro-life. So I'm attacked online, and there was talk we're going to picket your church, and and I'm saying that kind of foolishness is foolishness that is playing with the lives of the unborn.
Amen. No, absolutely.
That's the kind of thing I'm talking about.
Amen.
That makes sense.
I'm not talking about younger pro-life voices saying, "Hey guys, be encouraged. We can do better. Pick it up. You've done great.
Yeah.
Let's go further. We can do more." I think we're in a moment where that will sell. That'll preach.
Yeah.
I guess I feel like we're on the other side of the problem now, where I feel like there's too many cowards or too many leaders in office who wouldn't do enough, or who aren't strategically trying to do the right thing. And then if the right thing does come, like this abortificant stuff over Skype, we just rescind it. We just kind of give in. I feel like that's our bigger problem now. Is that kind of
and maybe part of it too is I think part of engendering courage. So there is a certain kind of like overreach where you end up getting like you get routed. So I think what we want to avoid is being routed by the enemy. On the other hand, there's a lot of good fighting that takes place where you're just holding ground and maybe pushing forward a bit, but you actually have to fight. You actually have to have skin in the game.
Sure.
And that means it's actually going to be painful. You are going to have losses in good fights. I think that maybe one of the things that we want to encourage more of is let's fight more. Let's not just stand there and hope for the perfect shot.
But every year in the 35 states that would allow abortion, that would outlaw abortion, every year bills are coming to the surface and making their way to the Supreme Court.
Right.
So there really is there really is, I think, an active, principled pro-life movement, and not just a pro-life industry.
Right. Yes. They're serious about trying to overturn abortion.
They're serious about trying to outlaw abortion.
Yeah,
yes.
yeah.
I know Idaho Right to Life was against Dan Foreman's bill.
Yeah.
And I think, and again,
blows my mind.
And they were counseling the senators down in Boise to also vote to rescind this anti-abortificant legislation.
Yeah. I mean, a big part of it, I think, is we do need to just keep pushing it, keep talking about it, and we need to let people know that we're going to stand behind them.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right, Vegas.
Vegas next.
Vegas and Jimmy Kimmel.
Ooh.
Give us grace, Lord. Next on Cross Politics.
This is Cy Timbergenke with Answer Anyone Apologetics. Somebody comes up to you and says that they don't believe in God. What have they just done? They've just blasphemed God. You see, blasphemy is not only taking the name of God in vain, but taking His word in vain as well. In Romans chapter 1, we're told that everyone has sufficient knowledge of God to leave them without excuse. When someone says that they don't believe in God, they're in effect calling Him a liar. They're blaspheming God. What do? We ignore the blasphemy and lay out our evidential case for God. Now imagine that somebody came up to you and said, "I think your wife's a prostitute." They'd be in a way blaspheming your wife. Would you say, "Well, last night she was at home making dinner, so I don't think she was out walking the street. The night before that she was at choir practice, so I'm pretty sure she wasn't walking the street then either. And the night before that she was at her parents' house, so I really don't think my wife's a prostitute." Would you do that? Would you lay out an evidential argument for your wife's purity? Of course not. You'd say, "That's my wife you're talking about. Choose your next words wisely." Why then, when people blaspheme God, do we act as though nothing has happened? Christians need to revere the name and the Word of God. Sure, have the discussion with the unbeliever, but make sure that they realize what they're doing when they say that they don't believe in God. For more apologetic answers, visit AnswerAnyone.com.
Here we are again in the aftermath of another terrible, inexplicable, shocking, and painful tragedy, this time in Las Vegas. As you know, at least 59 people are dead. Hundreds of people were wounded in what they say was the deadliest mass shooting in modern American history.
That is the voice of Mr. Jimmy Kimmel. Oh boy, guys. I had to edit this, so I listened to it a couple times already.
Yeah.
It still hurts like the first time. It still hurts.
How does it hurt you?
My heart, my head,
my heart, my feelings,
all the way around. Everything hurts. My fingertips. Mostly because, Jimmy. Okay, so everybody knows what happened in Vegas. We don't have to go through that again. It was just horrible.
Right.
It was just a horrible event. And what falls out from that is the part of me that wants to mourn and wants to help and wants to be engaged in what's going on there to help those people who are hurting or reach out to them or be able to spread the gospel there. I feel like sometimes I'm forced to have a sword in one hand fighting and then water in the other hand serving, and I feel like if I take my attention away from serving, then the guys over here are fighting and they're stabbing me in the back the whole time while I'm trying to defend one area and helping another.
Right.
And this right here is just, I feel like Jimmy Kimmel is just stabbing me in the back. And part of it is because he's passionate about those people who got killed. I really believe that. I think that he actually cares about those people who got killed.
Right, so he goes on to say he's from Vegas.
And so he's
his hometown.
he's from Vegas, his hometown. And so this is he did like a 10-minute monologue on his show the following night.
Of course, we pray for the victims and for their families and friends, and we wonder why, even though there's probably no way to ever know why a human being would do something like this to other human beings who are at.
I'm sorry, I can't. We do know why.
Yeah.
We do know why people do this.
Evolution.
We're the only people, Christians are the only people who know why this happens in the world.
But he's part of a different religion, David.
Yeah.
So he's
concert.
I'm sorry,
he's preaching.
Yeah, he's absolutely
right. He's having church. He's having church.
Yep.
And he's preaching.
Yeah.
But it's a different gospel. It's a different God, right? So that's he's telling. Go ahead. He's going to tell the gospel of this different religion.
You guys don't know this, but I'm playing a little game right now. I'm playing red face. So red face is you handle as much of this as you can and your face turns red, and then I stop the recording, and then you. So
okay, all right.
You can't tell it on me because I'm black, so my face has been red since it started the segment. So
your shirt is red.
This morning we have children without parents and fathers without sons, mothers without daughters. We lost 2 police officers. We lost a nurse from Tennessee. A special ed teacher.
So I think, back to your sympathy point, we hurt for the people of Vegas, and we hurt because we know that this world is broken. Like there are two common themes that every human has in this world. 2 common traits we all share. Traits, if you call them that. We all sin and we all die. So for Jimmy, what are we going to do about that? Right. And how do we? It's been a week now or since it happened, and you don't want to capitalize off a tragedy like Hillary Clinton's trying to do. Talk about gun legislation or first tweet out the door on this thing. But at the same time, there's Vegas has averages about 30 abortions a day.
Yep,
30 abortions a day. So in 2 days, Vegas has had 60 abortions, which is equivalent to what was killed in the massacre. And then, of course, nationally, it's 3,000 abortions a day nationally and all this. And to have Jimmy Kimmel cry about this is so imbalanced.
Oh, he's got 4 more minutes, so you might want to save some of that.
But he stops crying eventually.
School here in Manhattan Beach, and it's a kind of thing that it makes you want to throw up or give up. It's too much to even process. All these devastated families who now have to live with this pain forever because one person with a violent and insane voice in his head managed to stockpile a collection of high-powered rifles and use them to shoot people. He passed the government-mandated background check when he was in the store. He wasn't on any watch.
I see Pastor Toby's face is turning red.
He's getting to the gospel here.
Oh,
his gospel, right?
Yeah.
What's his gospel?
The solution. The solution.
The solution to the problem is you have it.
Didn't seem to have been a religious or political extremist. Came out of nowhere, and because of that, because there weren't any of the usual signs, I've been reading comments from people say this is terrible, but there's nothing we can do about it. But I disagree with that intensely, because of course there's something we can do about it. There are a lot of things we can do about it.
Preach the gospel.
But we don't, which is interesting, because when someone with a beard attacks us, we tap phones, we invoke travel bans, we build walls, we take every possible precaution to make sure it doesn't happen again. But when an American buys a gun...
So Jimmy's for that, right? He's for building walls?
Wait, he said...
Is he for travel bans?
He said
is
somebody
Jimmy
with
for
a
that?
beard attacks. He talking about you, Pastor?
Not what I'm looking at. I'm looking at another guy across the way.
I'm looking at another guy across the way too, Pastor Toby.
Well, Jimmy Kimmel has a beard.
Is that a racist comment? Did you just make a racist comment? If Cam Newton has to apologize for his comment to the reporter,
right?
I think.
Well, Kimmel's got a beard on the show when he's actually saying this.
So who is he talking about?
So here, let me point out one thing that he does in there that's really striking. He's preaching the gospel, and his gospel is we need to turn to government regulation to save us.
Right.
So we've had a disaster, we've had a crisis. We turn in the moment of our affliction to our God.
Right.
Right. But in this case, he just said a moment before that this guy passed all the standards. All
the current government standards.
All the current government standards. In other words, what he's doing is saying, look, your Savior screwed up and let you down, and the regulations that the Savior promulgated didn't save you.
He's preaching against idolatry.
And he says, and then he says, so let's turn again to our Savior and let him try again. Right? Yeah. In the Christian gospel, Jesus died once for all. That dealt with sin, period. Everyone who calls on the name of the Lord will be saved. And that has never failed. All right? The God that failed, the state, is the God that failed. The state is the idol that fails and necessarily fails. So if you...
I'm sorry. You were saying...
You going to take an offering or what?
Oh, that's coming next. We'll end the show with an offering.
Hold on.
So what happened in Vegas is what happens in Chicago every month. One at Chicago does it differently. Their style is different. It's one at a time. Right. Instead of all in one fell swoop. So it's one at a time. Right. And Chicago is one of the most gun-controlled places on the planet.
Illinois.
All right.
Illinois. Yep.
So if you say, so all you have to do is point at that and say, look, does your proposed offering to your God actually save lives? The answer is no, it doesn't.
Right.
All right. He wants us to pray to a God that he acknowledges failed us in this instance, and he promises to be a better God this next time around, and then if it fails again, we'll just have to do it again.
Higher,
and he's a God. Notice that he's a God though that is he assumes that the God would have saved us if he could have, but couldn't because there were a bunch of people that wouldn't let him.
Right.
Open theism.
So a bunch of people got in the way of this God saving them, and in a minute he's going to identify a bunch of those guys. In a minute,
he kills other Americans, then there's nothing we can do about that. And Second Amendment, I guess, our forefathers wanted us to have AK-47s.
Which were not used. That was not used.
I assume. Orlando, Newtown, Aurora, San Bernardino, every one of these shootings, the murder used automatic or semi-automatic rifles, which are not weapons you use for self-defense.
What? And what does that even mean?
Well, it's not weapons you use for self-defense if you're walking with your wife from the theater back to the car. You don't take one of those rifles with you. Yeah, you don't do that. But the Second Amendment was not because we wanted to protect the rights of deer hunters. It was not because we wanted to protect people against muggers, although that's a corollary.
Well, no.
They were worried about the British.
Hey.
It had to do with the militia.
Come on,
state. The state.
So the Second Amendment was
overweening state.
The overweening state, correct.
It was a defense for the people against the government.
Right.
Right. And he's gonna show a bunch of faces. What are the faces that he shows up? I don't know.
Basically, every conservative,
all the Republicans
who voted against
or are part of the NRA.
I think they voted against some bill that was supposed to like limit
like silencers or something.
I thought it had to do with people who were like couldn't pass a particular.
Let's let him talk.
Yeah.
Okay.
Their weapons designed to kill large numbers of people in the shortest possible amount of time. And this guy reportedly had 10 of them in his room, apparently legally. At least some of them were there legally. Why is that allowed? I don't know why our so-called leaders continue to allow this to happen. Or maybe a better question, why do we continue to let them to allow it to happen?
There it goes.
There you go.
5 people got shot in Lawrence, Kansas last night. 3 of them died. It didn't even make a blip because this is just a regular part of our lives now. And
especially in Chicago.
You know what will happen? We'll pray for us.
Exactly.
Right.
Well,
he should, like Jeff Durbin does on Next Week. After every show, he talks about how many babies were saved to end abortion now.
Yep.
Jimmy Kimmel should do that for Chicago.
How many people were killed?
Yeah.
Some of us won't get motivated. The bills will be written. They'll be watered down. They'll fail. The NRA will smother it all with money, and over time we'll get distracted. We'll move on to the next thing, and then it will happen again and again. And last night, the White House Press Secretary Sarah Sanders said this is not the time, or actually it was today, this morning, she said it was not the time for political debate. And I don't know, we have 59 innocent people dead. It wasn't their time either. So I think now is the...
Uh-oh. He's coming in.
I'm having a conniption here. Okay, I love that he wants to talk about innocent people. I love that he wants to talk about people who are vulnerable. Yeah. I love that he wants to talk about life being valuable. I'm glad that he wants to bring that conversation to the...
How tall do you have to be before Jimmy Kimmel cares?
Come on now.
Oh,
before he comes on the show.
Where's my organ at?
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
So I think the other side of this coin is how are we getting into this point in our country where these shootings are becoming far more frequent? Right? What's going on to where these shootings are I mean, we had a shooting at a high school up in Spokane just a couple, 3 or 4 weeks ago. I mean, there's it seems like almost every month we're having something like this happen
on school shootings.
Let me adjust that question slightly.
Did you just interrupt the pastor?
I did.
He
it
did.
seems like every month.
I'm remembering what I was going to say.
Right. You don't get communion this week, bro. You just lost that. You just lost it. I'm not with him, Pastor. I'm not with that dude.
Well, these things happen, like the media reports. The media reports on these things, but they happen in Chicago all the time. No one cares about that.
Right.
So there's even a funny thing going on there. But
yeah. So if you want to ask, you have to ask yourself in situations like this. And let's say I don't think it ought to be politicized within hours. We ought to let the grieving. You shouldn't be talking about the politics while the ambulances are still on the way to the hospital.
Right.
Right. So give it a tip. But in the aftermath, when it's still fresh, a week later, I think it's reasonable to talk about. Yeah. But when you go to talk about it, you have to ask yourself, what things would I not be allowed to say in this situation? Mm-hmm. So if you look at school shootings, I'd say, all right, let's have a serious conversation about school violence.
Yeah.
How many of the kids who shot up their school were on prescribed drugs?
Ritalin.
How many of them were on some sort of
meds?
Well,
most of them
in modern history at the school shootings, of the ones we know about, all of them.
Everybody.
Right. All of them. And then the others are not released. We don't know. I don't know of any confirmed case of a school shooter, a student shooting up a school that wasn't on drugs.
That's right.
And over the door, this is a drug-free zone. Yeah. Well, yeah, right.
How's that working for you?
In other words, the school wants a monopoly on the dispensing of drugs.
Mm-hmm.
And no drugs here except the ones administered by the school nurse. Okay, so look at what drugs you're prescribing. Look at how many of the shooters had fathers.
Yeah.
Okay,
or didn't have fathers.
How many of the?
Right, that's the point. Yeah.
So the point is, how many of the people who shoot up a place grew up in a stable home with dads? How many people who are incarcerated for murder, violent crimes are victims of fatherlessness, and then their victims are one step downstream. And then ask yourself, what has the sexual revolution done to break up the home? what has pornography done to fuel this epidemic of fatherlessness? And all of a sudden, you discover that there's a whole host of things that have nothing to do with the gun
itself.
Nothing to do with the gun. It has to do with the heart of man.
Go ahead.
That's the thing. So there has to be sin in every religion. There has to be a sin, and for Jimmy Kimmel, the sin is guns.
Yeah.
Right.
And the people that won't outlaw them.
Yeah.
Right.
But we always want to heal the wound lightly. So we want to have some way of saying we've done something big, and there has to be pain involved.
Atonement.
There has to be atonement.
Blood,
There has to be pain. And so something like banning guns, it'll make a lot of people upset. It will be pain involved.
Yeah.
And so it will feel cathartic, like we've done something.
We've been satisfied.
Yes, something's been done. Yeah. It's painful. It's a struggle. We can do this. But it won't actually do anything.
Like Joe in the volcano, right?
It won't actually save.
That's right.
Because you ban guns and then you just start having knife attacks.
Well,
right?
and here's what's funny about when something like this happens. The liberals are now able to get the conservatives to do something that the liberals would never be able to do themselves.
I think that
NRA is now supporting bump stock.
Well, that's one thing.
Legislation.
Liberals are getting conservatives now. They've been moving them this whole time. They've getting conservatives to look like jerks.
Yeah, but the bump. I would say for the NRA, the bump stock thing is simply a tactical retreat.
Oh yeah,
it affects virtually nothing.
Yeah,
and with the advent of 3D,
3D printing,
with 3D printing, where people can print their own bump stocks and everything, and all of a sudden everybody knows there's bump stock. There's bump stocks. There's things that do that, and
3D printers are going to go up now.
Yeah,
great sales. Pastor, do something for me. When I hear stuff like this, I want to grieve with people who are grieving. And at the same time, I want to smack Jimmy Kimmel in his face at the same time, and I want those kind of arguments to die fast, and I want to be able to lift up people who are hurting.
Right.
How do you manage to do both of those at the same time with the gospel?
Right. So basically, the gospel is what God gave to us that comforts the afflicted and afflicts the comfortable. Jimmy Kimmel is comfortable. He's ensconced in Hollywood. He's ensconced in this world that can make violent movies without end, right? Just shooting them up, blood on the camera movies. That's the entertainment world is vile and entertains us with this stuff, and then pretends that that's just entertainment. It has no effect on people. Yeah. Is that why people spend that much money to buy 30 seconds of Super Bowl halftime commercial time? Is because video images don't affect behavior? Oh, come on. So basically, I think that we ought to really weep with those who weep, the true victims in this sort of thing, and do what you can, donate, give blood, that sort of thing, and then take a hard stand against anybody who's preaching a false religion. And that's not the gospel. That's not Jesus. That's not salvation.
And ultimately, that ends up hurting the very people that they say they're trying to protect.
Right.
That's
and the thing is, everybody knows that it's honest. It looks in the mirror that there's a violent man or woman inside every one of us. So
Right.
We're born in Adam. We're all Cains. We've all hated. We've all murdered with our words, right?
Yeah.
And so none of these things will work because ultimately we're not going deep enough. We're not going far enough. We're not looking in the mirror and speaking the truth. That's what the cross does, right? So the cross lifts up Jesus, the only righteous one.
Yeah.
He's the one who's beaten to a bloody pulp. He's the one who's crucified and died. It's in him that you both have the truth told about every Jimmy Kimmel, every Toby Sumpter, every Chocolate Knox, every one of us, right? Tells the truth about us. Yeah. And in it actually takes away our sin, actually washes us clean, and actually brings justice to the world.
Right. Amen. Cross goes all the way down.
All the way down.
Whew, I needed that because I was going to hurt Jimmy.
Don't do it. Jesus already died, David.
Amen.
Jesus already died.
Love God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. Love your neighbor as yourself. Until next week, go fight, laugh, and feast. Pastor Wilson, thanks for joining us on Cross Politics.
Thank you.
All right.